4 minutes before the palace announcement reached the public, one final event program was carried into Catherine's private office. The gold lettering remained untouched, the guest list was unchanged, and the royal crest still stood at the top. But one name had disappeared. Queen Camilla was no longer listed beside Catherine. In her place stood Princess Anne, and within seconds, a charity celebration became a declaration of royal power. Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. Catherine did not speak when the aide placed the revised booklet before her. She read Anne's name, closed her eyes, and pressed one hand against the page. Buckingham Palace, the monarch's London headquarters, had removed Camilla from the Crown Children's Recovery Gala, a charity evening supporting children's hospitals, bereavement groups, mental health specialists, and families facing long illness. The change appeared on the printed program, palace website, press briefing, seating plan, and donor letters. Nothing looked accidental. The Princess of Wales felt relief, but it came wrapped in sorrow. This was her most personal project since returning to royal duties, and she had promised that children, not palace rank, would remain at its heart. Camilla expected the evening to display unity between them before an international audience. Now Catherine understood that protecting the gala would wound Charles, embarrass the Queen, and expose a struggle the family had tried to hide. Camilla stared at two programs in another room, one bearing her name and one erasing it. Her reserved seat had been reassigned. "Who authorized this?" she asked. When the aide answered, she lowered the booklet so carefully that the silence felt more dangerous than fury. The Queen Consort knew this was no last-minute substitution. Anne had accepted the role hours earlier. She signed a formal confirmation, agreeing to represent the crown under Catherine's direction, meaning the palace had planned the replacement and protected it from reversal before Camilla was informed. Charles received his sealed briefing only after the change entered the publication system. To stop it, the king would have to overrule the charity trustees, the independent people legally responsible for the organization, and reveal the dispute behind the gala. Anne arrived through a separate entrance, while Camilla left to demand answers. She found Catherine alone, and said quietly, "I did not take her place. I accepted the place you needed filled." Elsewhere, Charles asked why his wife had been removed without warning, and who had decided her presence had become a liability. The missing name had shocked the palace, but the deeper danger lay in what each member of the family believed had been taken from them. To the public, the change appeared brutally simple. Camilla was out, Anne was in, and Catherine's event would continue. Inside the family, nothing was simple. One woman saw years of acceptance being erased. Another feared her life's work was being absorbed into palace politics. A third had stepped forward out of duty, knowing the act would be interpreted as conquest. Between them stood Charles, forced to choose between protecting his wife and preserving the future of the crown. Catherine remembered every family who had trusted her. She created the gala after private meetings with parents whose children had endured repeated hospital treatment and months of uncertainty. For her, the program was more than a royal engagement. A royal engagement is an official public duty carried out on behalf of the crown. She had promised those families that rank, fashion, and palace rivalry would never become the center of their suffering. Camilla saw the evening differently. She believed standing beside Catherine would prove old wounds had healed, and that she remained the senior royal woman at the heart of national service. Her office had prepared opening remarks, approved photographs, and contacted charities linked to her work. The Queen had invested reputation, influence, and pride in the gala, making her removal feel less like a scheduling change and more like rejection. Charles entered Catherine's sitting room without an equerry, a royal aide who accompanies the monarch. He held the revised program, but did not raise his voice. "Why did I learn after the printers?" he asked. Catherine answered carefully that she never wanted to humiliate Camilla, yet she could no longer allow the children's cause to be redirected into another household's campaign. The king heard respect in her tone, but also a boundary she would not surrender. Anne waited outside, catching fragments through the closed door. She gripped her handbag until her knuckles whitened. The Princess Royal, the title traditionally given to the monarch's eldest daughter, felt protective of Catherine. Yet she knew, accepting the role placed her directly against the Queen. Catherine then revealed that the independent trustees had demanded the change after receiving written plans to merge Camilla's patronages with the gala announcement. William supported them and warned palace administrators that his wife's work and recovery would not become cover for someone else's authority. Meanwhile, Camilla ordered every version of the event file brought to her. One handwritten note pointed back to a reception weeks earlier, where quiet concern became the point of no return. To understand why the palace removed Camilla so decisively, the family would have to return to the evening, when Catherine realized her own event was no longer under her control. The removal did not begin with a shouting match, a legal order, or a secret vote. It began beneath the chandeliers of a smaller reception 3 weeks earlier, when Catherine entered a room expecting to meet doctors and grieving parents, and discovered that Camilla's office had quietly changed the purpose of the evening. No announcement was made, no accusation followed, but one conversation beside an empty chair convinced Catherine that silence would soon become surrender. Catherine welcomed hospital directors, charity trustees, child psychologists, and families to St. James's Palace, a royal residence used for official meetings and receptions. She wanted the gathering to settle the gala's fundraising priorities and hear directly from those it would support. The Princess of Wales believed that promise mattered because every decision would affect children already carrying fear, pain, and months of treatment. Camilla's office had prepared something larger. Her team circulated a revised briefing calling the gala a joint initiative linked to the Queen's literacy, domestic support, and community programs. The document also requested control over the opening speech, donor introductions, branding, and official photographs. Catherine read the changes with growing unease, but she held her reaction until one mother approached. The woman spoke quietly. She asked why her recovering son's private experience now appeared inside a press package for causes unrelated to his treatment. Catherine froze. That story had been shared in confidence, not offered as palace material. The mother looked wounded, and the future queen understood that trust had already been crossed. Catherine found Camilla in a side room and asked who authorized the transfer. The queen consort said combining the programs would create greater royal impact, and argued that separate projects weakened the monarchy's message. Catherine answered that a family's pain was not palace property. Camilla stiffened, insisting she was protecting the event from becoming too personal, but the words only deepened the divide. Anne saw Catherine leave pale and shaken. Later, the Princess Royal examined the altered briefing, circled 3 unauthorized changes and said, "This is not support, this is possession." A handwritten directive inside the original planning file strengthened her warning. Camilla's senior aide had instructed staff to present the Queen as the principal coordinating figure across all female-led royal charity work. Catherine demanded every change be reversed within 48 hours. Only minor wording disappeared. The control remained. Her silence had reached its final limit. William then told her the matter could no longer be solved privately. Anne would attend the next meeting, and nobody would soften what had happened. The palace could still have avoided public humiliation, but only if 4 people entered the same room and admitted what they were truly fighting to control. There were no cameras when Catherine, Camilla, Anne, and Charles entered the small audience room. There were no advisors seated between them, and no prepared statements waiting on the table. Only 4 chairs, 1 disputed program, and a silence heavy enough to expose every divided loyalty in the family. What began as an attempt to prevent scandal became the confrontation that made Camilla's removal inevitable. Catherine carefully closed the door. 2 days remained before the gala announcement, and she had asked that no private secretaries attend. A private secretary is an aide who manages a royal household's official work and communications. She wanted no competing office to reshape what was said after they left. Anne agreed. Charles came hoping to preserve peace. Camilla arrived determined not to lose ground. Catherine made one offer. She asked Camilla to surrender control over the speech, donor list, family testimonies, and event branding, while remaining as an honored guest. The Princess of Wales believed this protected the children and the Queen's dignity. She was not demanding exile. She was drawing a boundary. Camilla pushed the proposed program across the table. "A future queen cannot behave as though her work exists outside the crown," she said. Catherine did not touch it. "The crown is supposed to protect service, not consume it." Anne leaned forward. Charles stared at the empty space between them, knowing the room had deeply divided before anyone admitted it. Charles defended his wife. He said Camilla's involvement had been misunderstood, and asked Catherine to approve a public statement calling the changes administrative cooperation. The king meant an explanation that would present the takeover as palace coordination. Catherine's face changed. He was asking her to deny what had happened. William's warning returned with force. Peace bought with silence eventually becomes permission. Anne opened a final consent record, the written file showing how families had agreed their stories could be used. 2 had withdrawn permission after receiving messages from Camilla's office. 1 parent wrote that they trusted Catherine, but had never agreed to join a wider royal campaign. The dispute was no longer about precedence. It was about broken confidence. Camilla refused to step back. She said surrendering authority would make her appear guilty. Anne answered that the appearance already existed, because the conduct had already occurred. The Queen rose and declared she would not attend as decoration beneath Catherine's control. Catherine removed Camilla's draft speech and placed it beside Charles. Anne quietly moved her chair to Catherine's side. Hours later, the trustees were asked to decide who would stand beside her. The confrontation ended without agreement, leaving the decision to a group Camilla could not command, and Charles could not easily overrule. Royal power is often imagined as a command spoken by a monarch. In reality, the most devastating decisions can arrive through signatures placed quietly beneath carefully written sentences. While Camilla waited for Charles to restore her position, trustees, palace officials, and charity lawyers examined who truly controlled the gala. By the end of the night, they had created a decision strong enough to survive royal anger, and personal enough to wound a queen. Catherine met the trustee chair in private, knowing the next signature would change the family. The Crown Children's Recovery Gala belonged to an independent charitable foundation, a legally separate organization whose trustees controlled safeguarding, consent, fundraising, and public representation. Palace support brought attention, but it did not give any royal household the right to use family stories or donations without approval. The chair told Catherine that leaving Camilla as co-host would appear to excuse every unauthorized change. She hesitated with the recommendation before her. The princess feared the removal would look like revenge, yet the official reminded her that protecting royal dignity could never come before protecting vulnerable families. Catherine signed before the announcement deadline, but she did so with sadness rather than triumph. Anne became the clear alternative. She had spent decades supporting charities without absorbing them into her own office, and the trustees trusted her discipline. The Princess Royal agreed only if Catherine remained the sole principal host, meaning the one person publicly responsible for leading the evening. She also refused a larger photograph, a separate entrance, or a higher speaking position. Her message was unmistakable. She would stand beside the work, not above it. Charles received the recommendation in his study. He read the sentence replacing Camilla with Anne twice, removed his glasses, and placed them beside the page. An equerry, a royal aide who assists the monarch during official duties, waited nearby. The king remained silent for nearly a minute because defending his wife now meant challenging the charity's independence and the families it existed to protect. William acted before anyone could weaken the decision. He instructed the palace communications office to publish the trustees' wording exactly, preventing staff from softening, delaying, or reversing it. The future king did not personally remove Camilla. He made certain the institution's own rules held the boundary. Camilla's staff then lost access. Invitations stopped arriving, revised speeches disappeared from their system, and her preparation room was reassigned. The Queen had expected Charles to restore her position. Instead, every closed file confirmed that the decision was no longer symbolic. The signatures had settled the question of authority, but the first visible consequences would transform private defeat into an experience Camilla could no longer hide. The first blow was the missing name. The second was far more personal. Camilla's staff arrived at the gala venue, expecting the usual security access, briefing room, and place beside the principal host. Instead, the doors opened onto a new order. Her flowers had been moved, her speech folder had vanished, and the room prepared for the Queen now carried a simple card bearing Anne's name. The palace decision had become physical. Camilla entered the Royal Hospital Chelsea without warning. The London home for retired soldiers had been chosen for its dignity and tradition of public service. Staff had replaced the joint host signs with Catherine's name above the entrance, and Anne's beneath the words, "Representing His Majesty," meaning she would attend officially on the King's behalf. The children and medical teams now stood ahead of every royal arrival. The Queen's office felt the consequences at once. Donor briefings, family histories, speech drafts, rehearsal times, and photography plans disappeared from its system. Her charities remained invited, but only as guests. They would not share the stage or appear as partners. The separation proved that Catherine's gala would no longer be folded into Camilla's wider portfolio. Camilla walked toward the room, usually prepared for the senior royal woman, and stopped at Anne's name. A staff member began explaining, but she lifted one hand and entered. A navy coat waited for the Princess Royal. Beside it lay Catherine's handwritten note, thanking her for standing with the families. Camilla read it twice. Silence broke her anger. She removed one glove, placed it on the table, and stared at the empty chair that should have been hers. The Queen Consort understood that Catherine and Anne no longer trusted her to share this moment of service. The wound was no longer rank. It was personal rejection. Camilla asked Charles to cancel royal representation, arguing that the gala would legitimize her humiliation. He refused. The king told her that cancellation would punish children and suggest that royal pride mattered more than public duty. For the first time in the conflict, he denied her request. Then the press release arrived. It called Anne Catherine's trusted senior supporter, language that defined belonging rather than substitution. Camilla realized the palace was not merely removing her, it was explaining why Anne had earned the place. William appeared as she prepared to leave. He asked for 5 minutes alone. She expected accusation. Instead, the prince offered one path to dignity, if she could admit what she had done without blaming Catherine. Camilla had lost the stage, the speech, and the title beside Catherine's name, but the next conversation would determine whether she also lost the family's remaining sympathy. For the first time since the crisis began, there were no trustees, aides, programs, or palace rules in the room. William closed the door and asked Camilla to sit, not as queen and heir, but as two people bound to the same damaged family. She expected accusation. Instead, he spoke about fear, hers, Catherine's, and his father's. In that unguarded conversation, the struggle finally stopped being about a charity event and became a choice between possession and belonging. William did not ask for a public apology. He told Camilla he had come because Catherine needed one piece of work that could not be taken, redirected, or used to measure her worth after months of illness and uncertainty. The prince spoke without ceremony, stripping away the language of palace offices. A royal household is the team that manages a senior royal's duties. But he said the real damage began when one household treated another person's trust as available territory. Camilla listened, then admitted the fear she had hidden beneath official language. She saw the gala as proof that she still mattered to the monarchy's charitable life. Catherine's return, public affection, and future role made the Queen fear she would slowly become invisible. What she called coordination had really been insecurity wearing the mask of authority. William did not soften the truth. You asked her to trust you while preparing to stand above her. Camilla looked away. The words hurt because they were accurate. She asked whether Catherine had wanted to disgrace her. He answered that his wife had repeatedly offered her a place as an honored guest. The Queen's refusal, not Catherine's cruelty, had created the final removal. Camilla sat in silence before telling William she would not ask Charles to intervene again. Then she wrote Catherine a private note by hand, creating a documented account of her decision. She acknowledged that the family's trust belonged to the princess's initiative, said Anne should remain beside her, and admitted that support could not be demanded through rank. Catherine read the note with Anne present. She did not celebrate. She placed it inside the event file and said Camilla could attend privately, without a formal role or press announcement. The boundary remained, but humiliation no longer had to become exile. Neither of them mistook forgiveness for permission to repeat the harm. Anne asked whether Catherine was ready. She straightened the program and answered, "We walk in for the families." Outside, broadcasters prepared live coverage, and the vanished name had become the story everyone believed they understood. The family had reached a private understanding, but the public would judge the decision through one photograph, one headline, and one unforgettable entrance. By sunset, the program change had escaped the palace and become a national argument. Commentators called it punishment, protection, succession politics, and the most visible realignment among royal women in years. Yet all the speculation collapsed into a single moment outside the Royal Hospital, Chelsea. Catherine stepped from the car, Anne emerged behind her, and neither woman reached for the center. Instead, they turned together toward the waiting children. Broadcasters broke into scheduled programs as the arrival unfolded. Some called it a generational transfer toward William and Catherine. Others described Anne's presence as a return to service-first monarchy. Buckingham Palace released one controlled sentence, stating that the Princess Royal would support Catherine at the trustees' request. Trustees are the people legally responsible for protecting a charity's purpose, money, and beneficiaries. The wording confirmed that the decision was final, and that Catherine's organization, not Camilla's office, controlled the evening. Charles watched the live coverage from a private room. When Anne stepped beside Catherine, the king looked proud and wounded at once. He understood why the change had become necessary, but Camilla's absence exposed the price of defending the institution against family pride. Each cheer for the two women carried a reminder of who was missing. Camilla remained unseen. She watched the opening minutes alone, heard the presenter mention Anne's new role, and switched off the broadcast. The Queen's handwritten note had prevented a deeper rupture, yet she could not bear to see another woman occupy the place she once believed was hers. Morning brought the image that settled the argument. The Daily Chronicle printed Catherine kneeling beside a young hospital patient, while Anne stood one step behind, allowing the child to remain central. Its headline read, "Service before status." A front page is a newspaper's main opening page, reserved for the story editors consider most important. The picture transformed a palace rivalry into a public verdict about leadership. Outside Buckingham Palace, a crowd gathered with flowers and cards for the families. One sign read, "Let their stories stay theirs." A television presenter repeated the words live, and the phrase spread because it explained the conflict more clearly than any palace statement. Catherine closed the gala by thanking Anne for standing beside the work without standing in front of it. The audience rose. Anne remained seated for a moment, visibly moved. Charles heard the words at the palace. Camilla heard them later in a recorded broadcast. Neither could escape their meaning. The public had chosen its interpretation, but only the family could decide whether the night would end as Camilla's humiliation or as a permanent lesson about the purpose of royal service. When the gala ended, no second announcement followed. Camilla's name was not restored, Anne did not claim a new permanent title, and Catherine did not speak of victory. The final meaning appeared in quieter choices. A program left unchanged, a king accepting a decision he could have challenged, and a queen acknowledging that rank could not repair broken trust. What looked like a palace removal had become a verdict on how the monarchy intended to survive. Catherine learned that the gala raised record funds for children's recovery programs, bereavement counseling, hospital support, and family accommodation. Every beneficiary story had been presented with renewed consent, meaning each family had agreed to how its experience would be shared. No royal office could reuse that material without separate permission. The event succeeded because the people it served remained more important than those attending. Anne refused suggestions that she should permanently replace Camilla. She told the trustees that she had stepped forward because the princess needed protection, not because she wanted new territory. The Princess Royal understood that permanent control would repeat the mistake they had challenged. Catherine found Anne removing her event badge after the guests had gone. She thanked her for accepting anger that would otherwise have fallen upon her. Anne answered that protecting someone's work did not make them weaker. It gave them room to stand. Catherine held those words, knowing they defined the night. Charles returned to Camilla and placed the final program between them. He did not lecture her. The king waited. Camilla said she understood why her name had been removed, and accepted that it would not return. She had confused influence with support, while Catherine had defended trust. Charles took her hand, recognizing both the mistake and the loneliness beneath it. Palace offices then adopted a formal rule. No senior royals charity could be merged, rebranded, or directed by another household without written approval from its leader and trustees. A royal household is the team managing a senior family member's work. The rule applied equally to Camilla, Catherine, Anne, William, and every working royal. The verdict was final. Anne proved that authority could be strongest when it refused to dominate. Charles learned that love could not erase consequences. Catherine kept control of work built from personal trust. Camilla lost her place, but not her chance to understand why. And when the final program was placed in the royal archives, Camilla's missing name no longer represented humiliation alone. It marked the night the crown chose service over status, and accepted the human cost of doing so. Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in next one.